It was an ordinary afternoon in the bustling market, horns honking, vendors shouting, and families weaving through the noise. But in the middle of all the chaos, a tiny figure stopped moving. A baby, no older than 2, stood frozen, his round eyes locked onto something no one else seemed to notice. Across the street, tied tightly to a rusting motorcycle, was a German shepherd. His tongue hung out from the heat, and his paws shuffled anxiously against the burning pavement. People passed by with barely a glance, some even laughed, thinking it was a joke. But the baby didn't laugh. He didn't blink. Instead, he pointed with his tiny finger and tugged on his mother's sleeve. Something in his innocent gaze said what words couldn't. Help him. No one knew then that this silent moment, this one act of pure empathy, would lead to something unforgettable, something that would leave everyone in tears. His name was Ian, a curious little boy with wide, wondering eyes and a heart that felt everything deeply, even if he couldn't say it out loud. At just 20 months old, Ian had a quiet nature. He wasn't the kind to throw tantrums or demand attention. But when something touched him, he felt it with his whole being. His parents, Zara and Imran, were a young couple juggling life in a busy city. That day, they had taken Ian out to the nearby Sunday Bazaar, one of the noisiest, most crowded places in town. Zara was scanning stalls for fresh fruit while Imran checked prices on his phone, both unaware of what had just caught their son's eye. The street around them buzzed with people bargaining, cars honking, and the smell of fried snacks in the air. But amid all that noise, Ian had noticed the one thing no adult had, a silent cry for help. A German shepherd tied so tightly to a parked motorcycle that he couldn't even lie down. While grown-ups moved past the dog like he was invisible, Ian didn't. He stood still, staring. His small world had stopped spinning, and soon, so would everyone else's. The German shepherd was in rough shape. His fur, once likely thick and shiny, was now matted with dust and oil. His ribs showed slightly beneath his coat, and his tongue lolled from his mouth as he struggled in the heat. The chain that tied him to the motorcycle was short, so short he couldn't sit comfortably, let alone lie down. He kept shifting his weight, paw to paw, as if the ground itself burned beneath him. Ian stepped closer, one small foot after another, pulling gently from his mother's grip. He pointed again, softly murmuring a sound, more like a whimper than a word. Zara finally looked up, confused. "What is it, baby?" Then she saw the dog. Around them, others walked by casually. A few giggled. One teenager even said, "That dog's always tied there. It's just for fun, he belongs to one of the shop guys." No one seemed to care. But Ian wouldn't look away. His lips trembled. He sat down on the ground and stared, eyes locked with the dog's. It wasn't just curiosity, it was connection. The kind that didn't need language. And in that moment, his mother realized, this wasn't just a child's reaction. It was a plea. Ian refused to budge. Zara tried lifting him, coaxing him with toys and snacks, but he only pointed back at the dog, his tiny hand trembling. His big brown eyes were glassy, and his little chest rose and fell with quiet, shallow breaths. He didn't cry loudly, but the weight in his silence began to draw attention. People nearby started noticing the stillness around the boy. One elderly woman paused her shopping and turned. "Is that child okay?" she asked. A few heads turned toward the dog. Some frowned. Others walked away. But one man stepped forward, crouched next to the motorcycle, and muttered, "This dog's not okay." He touched the chain. "It's burning hot," he hissed, pulling his hand back. The dog flinched, his body stiff. His water bowl was dry. His leash had no slack. And there was no shade. A small crowd began to form. Whispers spread. Some pulled out phones. A woman recording said, "This is animal cruelty. Someone tied this poor dog up and left him here." Moments later, a teenager from a nearby stall yelled, "That's Malik's dog. He always does this. Says it's just a prank." Ian, still sitting cross-legged, didn't understand their words, but his stare never broke. His mother stood behind him now, visibly shaken. That's when Imran, the father, finally arrived from the other side of the street. He looked at his son, then the crowd, then the trembling dog. And his expression changed. This was no longer just a child's tantrum. It was the start of something bigger. Just as the tension in the air grew thick, A man in his late 20s strutted toward the crowd, holding a soda bottle and laughing. "What's the big deal?" he said casually, waving at the dog. "It's just a dog, man. I tied him up for fun. He's fine." The crowd didn't laugh. One woman stepped forward, her phone recording. "You left him in the sun for hours. He could have died." The man scoffed. "He's used to it. Stop acting like it's a child." That was when Zara stepped in, holding Ayan close. Her voice shook, but it was strong. "He may not be a child, but my child is the only one who cared enough to notice him." She pointed at Ayan, still quietly staring. "What does that say about the rest of us?" The man rolled his eyes and reached for the leash, but someone stopped him. "Animal control is on the way," another man said. "Touch him now and it's a bigger problem." For the first time, the owner looked unsure. The dog whimpered low. People surrounded the area now, phones out, voices raised. And at the center of it all stood a baby, whose silent protest had shaken an entire street into action. The sound of a siren in the distance brought a hush over the crowd. Moments later, an animal rescue van pulled up, its white paint chipped but its purpose clear. Two officers stepped out, one holding a leash, the other carrying a water bowl. The crowd parted as they approached the motorcycle. The German shepherd lifted his head slowly, his eyes weary but alert. He didn't bark or growl. He just watched, like he knew help had finally come. One officer knelt beside him, speaking gently. "It's okay, buddy. You're safe now." With a pair of cutters, they snapped the tight chain. The dog flinched, but didn't resist. As soon as the chain dropped to the ground, the dog took one shaky step forward, and collapsed gently into the officer's lap. Ayan watched from a short distance, his fingers gripping his mother's dress. He didn't smile or cheer. He just kept watching, eyes wide, heart full. The officer glanced over at the little boy and nodded respectfully. "He saved him," he said quietly. And in that simple sentence, everyone around realized the truth. It hadn't been noise or anger that made the difference. It had been a baby's quiet refusal to look away. 2 weeks had passed since that day, but the memory lingered in the hearts of many. Word had spread about the baby who stopped a market with his silence, and the dog who was saved because of it. Zara and Imran decided to visit the local shelter with Ayan, just to check in. As they walked through the quiet rows of kennels, a familiar pair of eyes appeared behind a gate. The German shepherd, now cleaner, stronger and calmer, stood still, and then wagged his tail. He walked slowly toward the bars, his eyes locked on Ayan. No barking. No jumping. Just recognition, a connection that hadn't faded. Ayan reached out, tiny fingers pressing against the gate. The dog pressed his nose against them gently. It was silent, simple, and incredibly powerful. Zara looked at Imran, eyes welling with tears. "I think he remembers him." And deep down, they knew, they'd all been changed. Some stories don't need grand gestures or loud voices. They begin with a child's quiet heart and end with a life saved. Ayan never knew he was being brave. He simply felt something was wrong, and in his innocent silence, he spoke louder than 1,000 words ever could. The world often teaches us to ignore, to walk past, to assume someone else will step in. But sometimes, it takes the purity of a child's soul to remind us what empathy truly looks like. That dog wasn't just rescued from heat and neglect, he was rescued from being forgotten. And the boy who saw him, he reminded everyone watching that compassion has no age. So the next time you see something wrong, stop, look, feel. Don't turn away. Because sometimes, it only takes one person, one tiny heart, to change a life. And that day, it was Ayan.